All right, so hello everybody. My name is Jason Blanchard. I'm the content community person. I go by the excitement co-creator now at Black Hills because I like to co-create excitement with other people. But way back in 2019, I co-created Backdoors and Breaches with John Strand and the testers here at Black Hills, and we created this game so that you could play it. That's the thing about Dungeons and Dragons. Like, it's better when you play it. Like, I'm going to show you how to play it, but it's way better when you play it, because when you play it, you get to make it your own. You get to go on your own quest. You get to tell your own stories. You get to figure out your own incident response. You get to figure out your own flaws and your own security. And so I'm going to go through some of the basics of backdoors and breaches today, so that way you can use it internally, so that way you can figure out your incident response plan ahead of time. Now, since today is the most offensive that ever offends conference, I want to show you one thing. So there is this thing up here. If you look, it's the attack. All right. So I'm showing on my screen right now, we have the attack chain, and I don't want to say the cyber kill chain, because that means I have to. Thank you, Lockheed Martin. Okay, so we have the kill chain up here, and if I hit refresh, I get a brand new kill chain up here. And so the initial compromise was a fish, which led to an internal password spray, which the attackers exfiltrated data through HTTP, and they used DLL attacks as a form of persistence. And so in every deck of backdoors and breaches, if you have a physical deck, or if you're playing here online, and if you hit refresh, you get a brand new attack scenario. So now it was a password spray. If you don't know what that is, credential stuffing, DNS is C2, and then they use logon scripts as a form of persistence. So for those of you that are concerned about attacks, offensive security, and other things, if you want to, let's say every Tuesday afternoon, send something to your senior leadership of here's a possibility of ways that we could be hacked. You could just say, it could be a password spray, and you give a brief explanation of what the password spray is. Where the attackers use credential stuffing, you give a brief explanation of what that is. And then they use DNS as a form of command and control, and then you can explain what command and control is and a little bit about DNS. And then you can say what logon scripts are. And you can say, hey, this is a possible attack that we could face as an organization. Just want to let you know. And then next week, you can do the same thing on Tuesday or whatever. And this time it was social engineering that led to local privilege escalation, where the attackers use HTTPS as exfiltration, and they use application shipping as a form of persistence. So what this is also like, hey, pen testers out there or offensive security people, if you want to how am I going to start my next engagement? Let's see, what am I going to do first? Oh, we could start with a password spray. Oh, and then if we can broadcast multicast protocol poisoning to work, that'd be sweet. Oh, let's see if we can get a HTTP as my exfiltration channel. Oh, and accessibility features. I haven't done access. Oh, well, I need physical access. If I need physical access, how do I get physical access? So maybe this becomes your can I do the mission impossible? All right. For those of you that don't know what all the attacks are, and today is I don't know what all these cards are that you're talking about. So if you're trying to explain to senior leadership or other people in your team, or this is great for onboarding new people, because if you're onboarding new people, a lot of them are like, I've never heard of fish. Well, a fish is different. Okay. External cloud access. Now here's an opportunity to talk about all your external cloud access features. In fact, we have an entire cloud security expansion deck of backdoors and breaches coming out later this year from Bo Bullock and some of the other people on our team. All right, so the attackers get in through an external cloud access. Now, what happens is you can start talking about what cloud access accounts you have and what abilities you have and what features and services you have. And so you can start explaining that to new people. And then you get over here to local privilege escalation. You're like, well, how does external cloud access, how could they potentially get into local privilege escalation? And so you can explain this to the people on your team. And then you're like, well, DNS is C2, and you can talk about potentially all the times in the past that DNS has been used in a form of compromise for your organization. And then you have malicious browser plugins, where you can explain, do we allow developer mode to be accessible in our browsers? And all of a sudden someone goes, do we allow developer mode? I don't know. Do we? I think we do. oh, I don't know if we disable that or not. And so all of a sudden the conversation turns to, do we allow malicious browser plugins to be installed? So here's the thing about backdoors and breaches. This is a conversation starter about security in a non-threatening environment that is disguised as a game. That's the way I've been trying to explain it to senior leaders later, where they're like, well, I don't know if I want to play this game. I was like, would you like to have a cybersecurity conversation that's in a non-threatening environment where everyone can just talk about the truth and the facts instead of, people's personal opinions and the political nature of like your organization? I was like, yes, I would like that. All right, cool. Okay. So the top cards are the attack cards. So you have the initial compromise, pivot and escalate, C2 and exfil, and persistence. Now down here, I get to see those. So if I wanted to, if I was running this game as the incident captain, I would look down here at the solution. I would see what the solution is, and I would know that it's credential stuffing with local privilege escalation, domain fronting a C2, and malicious service. Now, if I didn't know what these things are, I could read the explanations a little bit and understand. If you really want to get good at coming up with scenarios to use in backdoors and breaches, I highly recommend listening to Darknet Diaries. And so if you haven't listened to Darknet Diaries, please listen to what Jack has put together, because those things are fantastic. And the more you listen to Darknet Diaries, the more you can come up with scenarios for backdoors and breaches, because you'll like, oh, this one's from Jeremy in marketing, or this one's in this, or this one's in this one. So highly recommend Darknet Diaries if you have not ever listened to it. Okay, so what happens is you have these 4 cards, and these 4 cards are hidden like Clue. So think of this game as Clue meets Dungeons and Dragons meets incident response. So Clue, because something's hidden, got to figure it out. Dungeons and Dragons, because it's fun and you got to roll dice, and we'll talk about that in a second. But then you have incident response. And so a lot of times when I play this game with actual companies that want a paid tabletop where we show up and we get real deep into their incident response plan, is that we use this game to start building out their incident response capabilities, because sometimes you don't know how to respond to something until you have a reason to respond to something. And if you have a playbook, I'm not saying burn it. I am saying like it's probably not going to be useful. It's not. So we're more fans of incident response Legos. Like I can put these Legos in any configuration and build something new, and I can build these Legos and make something new, and I can take the same ones apart and build something new, and I can take the same ones apart and build something new. Instead of a playbook that says, if we do this, then we do this, then we do this, then we do this, because that never works, because attackers never attack you the same way twice. And if they do, they're probably different attackers who are just using the same methodology. Okay, so what we got up here, once you have the attack cards, and so if you're the incident captain, you're leading the session, it's credential stuffing with local privilege escalation, and so you come up with a scenario. My scenario in this would be, here, I'll give you a brief scenario. I would say to you all, the people who are being the incident responders, the defenders who are getting ready to get this scenario, I would say something like, over the last 3.5 weeks, you've noticed that you have a higher percentage of failed logon attempts from past and current employees. So past and current employees. So employees that no longer have access to your account, and employees that do. So that's all you got to go on. What would you want to do first? And so I give a brief scenario. The goal is to give the least amount of information that you have, but something where what would the SOC analyst say? Or what would someone this is weird. And you're like, cool, that's weird. So you want to give it the least amount of knowledge you can to get people start asking questions, because questions are great. Because when people are like, well, what about this? And you're like, that's fantastic. There are 2 types of questions inside backdoors and breaches when someone asks the incident captain. One is a clarifying question, and then the other makes them have to go do something. And so if it's a clarifying question, like, well, how many failed login attempts above average? And you're like, oh, it's an average of 30% more than your baseline throughout the year. And you're like, okay, so it's 30% more failed login attempts of past and current employees. Normally we don't have past employees that are trying to log in. And so they don't know what these cards are. Only the incident captain knows what these cards are. And so what happens is the team goes, well, let's go ahead and use some of our procedures. So if you see procedures here, and we got established procedures and we got other procedures. Okay, so what we got right here is these are all the different incident response Legos you could potentially have at your organization, like user and entity behavior analytics. So when I do a tabletop exercise and someone's like, let's go through our IR plan, I will ask them questions like, well, what kind of capabilities do you have for user and entity behavior analytics? And if I get a glossed over look of don't think I know what you're talking about. Then we get to talk about what that is. And then sometimes they give me like a very in-depth question of, well, they have this, and it's layered in this way, and it's ingested into the sim. And I'm like, okay, crap, this is going to be a really hard tabletop. All right. So we have cyber deception. We love cyber deception at Black Hills. We love it and we hate it, right? We love it because it makes you more secure. We hate it as pen testers because it makes our jobs a whole lot harder as pen testers. And so the goal is to make our lives harder as pen testers every single pen test that we do, so that way it gets better security for you. But if you implement cyber deception in your environment, fantastic. Kudos. Good job. Isolation. This is one of my favorite cards because we get into policy. We get into a lot of policy. And here's the 3 questions that you ask whenever someone wants to do the isolation card. And so I'm giving you a little, if you've ever played this before, here's some additional tips that you could use. If you've never played this before, here's some things that you can think about when you start to play. Is the isolation card. Whenever someone wants to we want to isolate that system. And I'm like, cool. Let's say they roll the dice and they're successful. So we go over here and let's say they roll a 14. So 14 successful, 1 through 10 is unsuccessful, 11 through 20 is successful. And if you're thinking to yourself, why don't you just flip a coin? Because it's 50-50. Well, we also use modifiers. So over here, if you take a look and if you're like, I'm having a hard time following you, that's okay. It's recorded. You can watch this anytime you want. Plus, there's like a 60-minute how-to video with like a bunch of people playing it. And then other people play backdoors and breaches on the internet. And so if you're interested, you just do a search for backdoors and breaches and you'll find videos that explain exactly how to play and watch people playing. All right. So we have established procedures. These get a +3 modifier for dice rolls. They get a +3 modifier. So that means if I roll a 14, then it's actually a 17. And so this helps you. Why is it a +3 modifier? Because I don't know about you, but how many people in your organization actually do things, but they never write down the things that they know how to do? I am guilty of this. There's a lot of things I do that I don't write down. Ian has come on board, and Ian is now discovering all the things that I do that I don't write down, and he's trying to write them down to turn them into written procedures. And so in the future, Ian would get a +3 modifier for those things, but I don't. So I'm down here in these other procedures. So in the world of incident response, you probably wrote some things down, but you probably didn't write all the things down. So we consider these the things that you wrote down, which means you get a +3 modifier for those things. And then all these things over here, it's just a straight 50-50 shot. Okay, so I roll a 14 +3. I get a 17 now for isolation. And so here's the 3 questions that I ask whenever someone does something successfully and they have to do something. I will ask the question, who, please tell me their name, on your team that will actually do the isolation? And so they go, oh, well, that's Jeff, or that's Mary, or that's the help desk. And I'm like, the help desk collectively, or like a person at the help desk? And they're like, the help desk collectively. I'm like, okay. All right. Second question. Who says yes to doing the isolation? I'm like, oh, okay. So that would be me. Someone's like, that's me, or like, oh, that's Ryan, or that's Jennifer, that they're the ones that say yes to it. I'm like, okay, cool. Now, who will take the political fallout if the isolation hampers the business to do business in a way that's detrimental to the business? I'm like, oh, I think that's Jeff. And you're like, okay, is it Jeff, or do you think it's Jeff? Because that's the thing about what we do, right? There's the person who does it, the person who says yes to doing it, and the person who takes the political fallout if the thing that we do causes a damage to the business or hindrance to the business. So those are the questions I ask. Crisis management. Oh man, you have no idea how many great conversations I've gotten into about crisis management. I'm going to ask this question now to the audience. Can anyone here, and please, give me your best answer. Can anyone tell me when an incident becomes a crisis? When does an incident become a crisis? And I've asked this question to hundreds of organizations, and I've gotten, if you wait for it, right? Like as the answers start coming in, what you're going to see is that nobody knows. Nobody knows when an incident becomes a crisis. But the thing is, decide ahead of time. When an incident becomes a crisis, decide ahead of time when that line in the sand gets crossed. Decide ahead of time when that gut feeling is past the gut feeling. I did work with one organization one time, and they said, well, Jason, a crisis for us is anything that reaches level 5 of severity of 7 levels. And I was like, Whoa, you have 7 levels of severity and they're all documented. And I was like, does everyone here know what all 7 levels are? And they're like, absolutely. And inside, I'm like, I don't think so. But they had decided ahead of time that level 5 out of 7 was a crisis. And at that point, they would invoke the crisis management plan. And then we got server analysis, SIM log analysis, endpoint protection analysis, like your EDR, your memory analysis, your threat hunting here. If you got Zeek or Rita, and now the EC Hunter Community Edition, we have endpoint analysis and firewall log review. All right. So if I gave that scenario to you, right, and go ahead and throw this into the chat, right? If I gave this scenario to you that over the past 3.5 weeks, you saw a higher frequency of failed login attempts of past and current employees over the last 3 weeks. And then, surprisingly, it stopped a day ago. Now, you wanted to give it a little bit of time to see, did it really stop or did it not stop? So it stopped about a day ago. What would you do first? If you took a look at all these different options here of things, user and entity behavior analytics, cyber deception, isolation, crisis management, network threat hunting, memory analysis, endpoint security, protection analysis, SIM log analysis, server analysis, endpoint analysis, firewall log review, what would you do first? I'm waiting. So we got network threat hunting. What I like is that some of you are throwing out the fun stuff. That happens during games too. So when you're like making jokes and you're having a good time, like I'm going to send my resume, like everyone laughs because everyone's having a good time. This is not a tabletop exercise where everyone's like, stupid tabletop exercise that we have to do every year for compliance reasons. This is so dumb. We never get anything out of it. But this one does. Like people have a good time. When you're rolling dice and you roll well, you roll a 14, you're like, who rolled a 14? And then if you roll, let's say a 2, you definitely feel that 2. You feel it just right there, just deep inside. And we have dice rolling because it's the closest thing that we can do to mimic the human response to incident response. Because when you roll well, you feel it, right? Just like when you find something during an incident, you're like, oh, I found it. I'm so good at my job. And then when you roll badly, and you're like, oh, I suck. I don't know why these people pay me. I should just quit right now. So that's the closest we can come to the actual human response. Okay. So some of you have like, well, what about network threat hunting, right? So what would happen is everyone would have to get to the same decision, right? We only do one card at a time. And so the person who says network threat hunting would have to say why they want to do network threat hunting. And then someone else might say firewall log review. And someone else might say, I would want to isolate. And then what happens is everyone talks it out. And everyone has to agree on the one thing that they do. And the person who threw out the one thing that gets chosen now rolls the dice. And if it works, you talk about that. And if it doesn't work, well, then you talk about that. And so when it doesn't work, you ask this question to the team. All right. So I'm going to ask this question to everybody right now. Ready? Here's the question. And you could probably think of an answer for this. Can anyone here listening right now in the chat give me a reason, either politically, financially, technologically, or a personnel reason like training or not having the people with the right skills? Can anyone here give me a reason why your organization would not do well with network threat hunting at this time? Not for forever, just like in this moment. Let's say for the next 45 minutes to an hour and 15, you would struggle with doing network threat hunting. Right? So either politically, financially, technologically, or personnel wise. And what happens is during tabletops, I ask that question to the team and they have to come up with the answer. And when you know your own security, you have a pretty quick response to all 4 of those. Like you're like, oh, well, because of this and because of this, and we don't have taps, and we actually haven't sent anyone to training, and that would probably be good. So this right here starts to reveal what your security actually is, and anything that you can think of, you write down as a potential finding to fix. Now, please, if you ever play this game in the future and you have a bunch of stuff that you wrote down while playing this game of like what politically, financially, technologically, personnel wise, like all these like issues that you come up with, do not try to fix them all. Do not try to fix them all. In fact, only fix one. Only fix one this time. And then next time when you play, fix one more thing. Then next time when you play, fix one more thing. And in fact, if you want to figure out what to do on your list, just roll the dice and do number 17. If you don't have that many things, hey, great job. But if you do, just do number 17 for now. Because what I've learned about humans is that if you have a long list of things to do after playing a game, you never want to play the game ever again. All right. So just one thing. All right. So lastly, I want to show you some of the inject cards. Let me know if you can see the inject cards here. You should be able to say it was a pen test. Let me know if you can see if it was a pen test. I just want to make sure that the pop-ups are also sharing too. Cool. You can see it. All right. So it was a pen test. So if this card comes up, then you could literally say, all right, it was a pen test. So it wasn't an actual attack. All the things that we've been doing up to this point, it was a pen test. And so you start talking through what would it be like if a senior leader or somebody else hired an outside pen test firm to start pen testing us without us knowing it? Like, how would that be politically? And how would that be for you as a team? Like, what are some of the things that would come out of this being the case? Now, over here, we got lead handler has a baby, takes FMLA leave. This is one of our favorite cards in the whole deck. So whenever I start playing with a team, I always write everyone's name down. And so I got Steve and Bonnie and Roger and Erica and John, and I have all these names written down. And then I give out the scenario. The very first person to speak, I put a little check mark by their name. I put a little check mark because that's the person who's a natural leader on the team. And so whoever's the first person to speak, if this card ever comes out, that's the person I silence. And they will remain silent for the rest of the session, no longer to be contacted or to interact with the rest of the team. So that way they can either learn one of two things. One, the team works fine without them, or two, it does not. If it doesn't work fine without them, then they need to fix that. If it does work fine without them, great job. Awesome. Way to go. Building up your team to be able to work without you there. I mean, that's what we all want, right? To have a team that can work without us there. All right. So we got other inject cards over here. Sim analyst returns from Splunk training. You get a +2 modifier for log related actions. They're not all bad. Unless you go to the expansion deck. Then they're all bad. Oh, God, they're bad. All right, so we're at the expansion deck right now, and we have more planned in the future. Huntress just made one. It is fantastic, and we'll incorporate it here soon. But the inject cards in the expansion deck, let's see. Honeypot's deployed. This one comes from the original deck. This isn't the first time and won't be the last time. And so if you take a look here, have the incident master draw an additional persistence card. So you find in your environment that like the attackers have hard-coded an actual backdoor. And so you go down here to add on scenario, and then you add an additional persistence card, but you don't get any more turns to try to solve everything. So now you have 5 cards to try to solve, or 5 cards in 10 turns. All right, so I go down here. Sim goes down. So it's discovered that due to an intern error, your logging server sim has not been logging properly for the last 2 weeks. All sim actions are off the table for the rest of the session. So you go down here, find your sim, and you kill it. You can't use the sim card anymore. All right. So I show you one more. Food poisoning. Oh, my favorite card in the whole deck. This is also like the COVID card, but we thought COVID at some point would kind of be like, maybe, hopefully one day, not necessarily as major of a problem as it is. But this one here is each of the defenders must roll a d20, and the person with the lowest number will finish the session by themselves without any assistance from others. And so everyone has to remain silent. Everyone has to be quiet. And then this one person who rolled the lowest number has to solve the rest of the incident by themselves. And what is it like when you lose your team? And see, the thing about a team is it's the team that makes it work. It's not one of us, it's all of us. And when we all work together, we can actually accomplish what we need to accomplish. And when you play Backdoors and Breaches, you get a chance to see that. You get a chance to see the team come together, share their knowledge with others, and do it in a non-threatening environment where they can actually talk about the facts of their security and not just the I think, or maybe, or try, or hopefully. It's not the wishy-washy, it's the facts, and it's the truth in a non-threatening environment. And that's it for me.
Thanks for watching. Achieve your next level of skills with training courses at antisyphontraining.com.